Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ryan, Christina, and Coach Derrick from OB Training and Sports Performance. And right now, there's a lot of crazy things going on in our world. There's a lot of sensitive conversations and topics that are being talked about. And something that we wanted to talk about, we feel it's important to help grow our culture here, help to express positivity, especially in a negative world. So we're sitting down with our Coach Derrick today to talk about some of the sensitive topics in racism and how it's affected his life over the years being in a community like Utica, New York, growing up here, and also some of the positive actions he's been able to take as of recently in our community to further develop the awareness around this topic and push for positive change. So there's going to be a candid conversation, no real direction with it, just to get some insight into this, and like I said, hopefully provide some positivity into our world, and yeah. So Derrick, where would you like to start?
I would like to give some background of me first and
Sure.
my knowledge on everything that's going on in regards to policing, like the police brutality, the racism, stuff like that. So I personally think I have a super unique angle coming at racism and police and stuff like that. And one is because I was adopted by two white parents at birth. And so I've always grown up not looking in the black culture kind of from the outside looking in. Because yes, my skin color is black, and if you were to see me on the street, you'd be like, oh, he's clearly black. But the culture that I grew up with was my mom and my dad. That was our culture. It was us. It was me and my mom, and we created our own little culture. And it was we were kind of ignorant to the things that were going on. And secondly, because I graduated with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and I minored in psych and soc. And my senior thesis, so I wrote a 55-page paper on police brutality and...
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, on police brutality and ways to reduce rates and stuff like that. And that was my whole senior fall semester was this paper. And I like to say very original angle when talking about those topics back then, because I did not want to include race even a little bit. That's what my professor was so upset. She was like, how can you talk about this and not include race at all? I'm like, trust me, just trust me, I got this. We're gonna get through this. And
Did you make it through?
yeah, we made it through. She was at the end, she was like, I want you to publish this and everything. I was like, nah, I'm trying to get out of here. So in the paper, I talked about how there's different psychological theories. One was the mayhem theory, which is it's a theory stating that people are more likely to be hostile and on edge when they watch the news and they see all these bad events happening, but you don't experience it on a personal level, or you don't experience that culture or the people you see on TV. So you're more likely to believe that if you see a movie or something like that and you see a black man breaking the law or something like that, but you don't really associate with the black culture on a day-to-day basis, you're more likely to be hostile when you're around that specific person or culture or whatever it may be. And so what I was saying in the paper was that I was trying to stress that police officers are also humans, okay? And a lot of times when we look at police brutality and stuff like that, we only look at the flower up at the top, but we're not looking at the seed, what's happening below. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good way of putting it.
So that's really what I tried to stress, that these police officers are also watching the news and seeing other police officers beat black men, and then they're seeing the hostility that's happening, so they're more on edge. And then as a black person, we're watching the TV, and we're more on edge because we're seeing this. So now everybody, it's just creating a really, really...
A vicious cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then when it actually, they're confronted.
Yeah, and then when exactly, so when it's actually confronted, and the topic is actually race, nobody knows how to talk about it. Because if you really think about it, and now I'm already going. Because now,
You do you.
over the past like 3 or 4 years, right? We know that there has been black people who have been mistreated by the law, okay, and police officers. It's in movies, it's in TV shows. We know about it, but we don't want to talk about it. I know that you guys are white. You know that I'm black, but we're not going to talk about it at first. If we ever would, you know what I'm saying? We would. If these topics in the news and stuff haven't arisen, then I don't think we would ever talked about like police brutality, any of these topics that are happening in our society. So it's been years of just kind of like, hey, how you doing? What'd you have for breakfast? What are you doing? Oh, the weather's so nice outside. But nobody's actually having conversations like, yo, did you hear about Trayvon Martin who got shot, or Ahmaud Arbery who was like on a jog and got hunted down? And just a side note real quick, since, we are fitness people, I know you guys run, I run. Yeah. When I heard about that, I was like, that legitimately could have been me. I run all the time, or like I'm doing fitness stuff all the time. And I was just like imagining like literally being hunted down and like whatever.
Well, I think that's a good point though, is people don't think of it like that.
Right.
Like they see it on a television, and even though they have a perception of what's happening, it's too far away for them to really acknowledge the reality of it.
Right, exactly.
So if they do get in a situation where they know someone and they talk, they don't ever think that it affects the person they're talking to because they weren't on the TV.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
it didn't happen here.
Uh-huh.
It happened on the West Coast, or
exactly.
It happened down south. Like it happened somewhere far away, so in their mind, it's almost like conscious blindness.
Yeah. I would say like even with the conscious blindness, like growing up, like all throughout college, we had like a Black Lives Matter like group in our school, and I was never associated with that. Like I was very assimilated, which is like what people, really realistically want me as a black man to be, because I'm just being more like everybody wants you to conform to whatever culture you have, which makes sense, and that goes with any culture. But and I was on the lacrosse team, so it was like if I am a black man as a lacrosse player, I need to assimilate to the lacrosse team because I need to be a part of that family. So it was like I always would avoid talking about the things that were happening in the news and stuff. And this is when I was in college, and I just recently realized the blinders that I put over my eyes as to with everything that was going on, because I was just afraid of like losing that community that I had, which was like the lacrosse, my teammates, my coach, So it's just interesting now that I finally like ripped off the Band-Aid from my eyeballs, that like there's a lot of things in the system of America that are corrupt that I've just kind of been like ignoring, and that I've even experienced myself, because it's always like here's a perfect example. Like when I was in college, my ex-girlfriend and I, we would argue, like whenever we would go to the bar. And I'm like, she would argue with me knowing that like, while we're in public, if something bad happened or somebody came up to us, they're automatically gonna go to her and assume that I'm like in the absolute wrong. They're gonna assume the worst.
That's why she's your ex.
Yeah, exactly. That's why she's my ex. So it was always like, no, we can't do this here, because like, I don't know if you understand, and this is me talking to her, I'm like, I'm literally a black man. Like this is not good for me. Like this is not where I need to be or anything like that. So I would always just shut my mouth and just like take what was coming to me, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So.
That's stuff too that like, if we didn't have this conversation, you'd never know that was going through your head, or like that was the position that you feel like you were in.
There were multiple times in college where it was kind of like, because I was a black man, I know that I had to be on my tiptoes and I had to be perfect. Where it was like, whether it's like how I speak to people, or if I can't raise my voice, or don't play loud music while you're driving, or anything like that. It was always like, I've always felt like I needed to be very, very perfect and very well put together, especially in public.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that people realize, especially like you said, if you don't know that culture, if you're not growing up in a community that has a lot of different races and a lot of different viewpoints, then you don't understand what someone else is going through.
Yeah.
And then when you don't talk about it, there's no way to ever know.
I know the talking. I'm so glad. Like, obviously, we respect the hell out of you. So to have this conversation is comfortable.
Yeah.
Like to have it. But for other people that don't feel comfortable to have that conversation, it's hard to get it started.
Right. Yeah. That's the biggest thing is like, I trust you guys and I trust Adam and I trust the people of this gym and the culture you guys created, which is like everything that I stand for. So I'm willing to have that conversation. But like most people, and now even more so because it's in the media and like, you know, I know that I'm not the only one. I'm more so likely to have this conversation. But if you talked to me about this like 2-3 years ago, I even myself would have been like, yeah, guys, like, we can't talk about this right now. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, I like that, you mentioned like the culture here. I think that's one thing that's special about fitness. We were just talking before we started about like my first experience in terms of black culture was from sports.
Yeah.
It was playing Pop Warner football and playing with the different teams from around the different areas and getting to meet different kids. And like that's how, from growing up in a predominantly white community, we were interacting with different cultures was through sports.
Yeah.
And then specifically here within fitness, we have people from all different walks of life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I do like about fitness too, is that it doesn't matter. Like, I know we've always said this before with meeting with people, like when people come to us, they're in just like regular clothes.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not you're meeting someone and they're in a suit behind a desk or something, or they're not coming in with a police uniform on or whatever it is. Like, you come in as neutrals, and it just makes for such a great community and culture.
It's always cool to see the people here that become friends and hang out that might not have ever met each other because they don't, like their walks of life, they would have never interacted.
Yeah.
With our sports performance program, that was really cool over the years to see that. We have kids come from Whitesboro, New Hartford, Clinton, Proctor, like all over the place, and they all become great friends. And then they're going out and they're experiencing each other's cultures, and they're getting to meet each other's families. They're getting to understand a lot about each other and develop those lifelong relationships that may never have happened if they didn't meet in some sort of setting like this that brought them together.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I guess, right? We talked about growing up and that, like, you grew up with white parents, and looking back at the education aspect of it, is there anything that we can do, hopefully, to make some sort of movement in introducing that earlier? Because I know from us, we went to New Hartford, wasn't super diverse, at least in my year, wasn't very diverse.
Yeah. So this was, I was listening to a podcast the other day, so I won't take full credit for the knowledge that I'm about to drop, but I'm taking some of it because you heard it from me.
But hold on, I'm about to drop.
In our educational system, looking back at it from my perspective, and I would say Proctor was a pretty good school. I wouldn't say it was underfunded or anything like that, but no matter what, like if you look back at the culture, the black culture that was learned in all throughout 12 years of public school, it was slavery, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and possibly Malcolm X. That's what you learn about the black culture. So right off the bat, if you aren't exposed to all the cultures like Ryan was, doing sports or whatever, while growing up, one of your first interactions may possibly be, and I'm sure there's people out there, is that black people were slaves. So that is automatically routing your brain to think that black people are servants and that they are on this country to serve.
Yeah, already creating that inferior, we're superior.
That's what we talked about last week. There's no positive education. I don't know about now, maybe it could be different, but when we were in school, there's no positive education about different cultures. It's obviously the civil rights movement and understanding that and knowing those people that you just mentioned, but they don't talk that's a conflict that they're talking about.
What happened the other 100 years? So yes, there was slavery, but what happened in between that? There was the Underground Railroad. We learned about that. But what about like the system that was created post-slavery, like Jim Crow law, where it was like you're only like 3/4 of a human being or whatever it was, or and after Jim Crow law, it was like mass incarceration, where it was like they exploited in the 13th Amendment in the Constitution that states that you can't have slaves except if you're a criminal. So it was like, okay, these were slaves. Then it was like, oh, we can't have slaves anymore, but if you break the law because you look at me wrong, now I'm gonna arrest you, now you're back to being a slave. So it was just like the Southern economy, which was purely funded by slavery, like cotton picking, everything. Slaves were just keeping the economy rolling in the South. And then when they got rid of the slaves, they were like, what are we gonna do to get this money going? What are we gonna do? We gotta do something. So then just a bunch of black people got arrested for minuscule, I can't say that word, for tiny things. Like if I were to look at you wrong or look at Adam or whatever it was, now I'm back to doing exactly what I was doing 2 years ago. And also, on top of that, think about this, where it's like, I don't think a lot of people think about it from this perspective, but you come to this country and you're a slave for literally your entire life. You're born a slave, right? And now it's like, you're not a slave no more. Go, run free. It's like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
What like most people to this day don't even think about what they don't even know what their 5-year plan is, their 5-year goal. But back in the day, now you're getting told what to do every single day of your life. And then one day it's just like, there's no more slavery. Yeah. People are just like,
what do you do?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
it's like people when they get out of jail. You ever hear people that are like,
Exactly.
I want to go back to jail because they get out and they're like,
Become so ingrained in that life, they don't know any other way.
and it becomes like that self-ambushing, or there's a term for it, where it's like you're like kind of setting yourself up.
Self-sabotage.
Yes, self-sabotaging culture and like mentality, where it's like, I can't do anything, whatever, and then you just go back to doing what you're doing, or like, yeah. So another thing in our school systems, have you guys ever seen the movie Freedom Writers? Freedom Writers.
so bad with movies.
It's like about, it's about a like 9th, 10th. So it's about high schoolers in LA, a really, really poor gang-populated part of LA, where it's like this new teacher comes in. She's super motivated and everything to change the culture and like to help these kids learn and make their better for their lives. But in the movie, you see that all these kids, right, of different minorities. It's not just black people, but all these like poverty lived kids are like thinking like pretty much the only way that they're going to survive in this country is through gangs and like through living off the street and stuff like that. So in the movie, you see this teacher go to the board of school, the higher ups, and she's like, we need to like get these kids books. Like, they're like, no, they're just gonna go home and ruin them. And I personally think like that is still a major issue in America, where it's like, if you live in a specific area and your school, or if you live in a poor area and your school isn't getting the funding or anything like that, you don't have computers, you don't have like smart boards now or projectors, or back in the day, I remember hearing some of my friends who had like actual projectors, and then we still had like
I know what you're talking about.
the scan sheet where you like put it on and it goes, and then it goes onto the board. Yeah, where it's like, and that's really that is the generation that's going to change the future for us, you know, where it's like, where we need to eliminate and help them learn and understand that there's a life for them that's different than just the system that we've created and we're living in.
Well, and hopefully all this, like maybe some crazy way, it's like a blessing in disguise, or however you want to word that, because like you're saying, this conversation would never come up if it wasn't for the things that are happening.
Yeah.
So maybe now the kids that are going through all of this at a younger age
Right, exactly.
can make the change when they get older, because the conversation can finally happen.
If you see on Instagram, there's like literally like 13-year-old kids holding signs like "My Life Matters."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When I was 13, I was not like that. I was
No.
like, I need to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
Well, even so Derek and his sister Liz organized it.
Yes.
Right. And Derek spoke at it, was on Saturday at Westmoreland. It was a peaceful protest. And to see the amount of people that came out that were young, like, honestly, like, we might have been like the top age that was there. And I thought that was really cool to see. Like you're saying, they're holding signs, and they have like a strong belief towards this, and they want to make a change. And same thing, like when I was 13, it was like, can I go to dance now? Like, you know, like I didn't have any of that level of thinking.
Yeah.
So to instill that now, it had to happen through a totally tragic and unfortunate event, but to spark that conversation is good to have.
I'm looking right into the camera because I'm talking to anybody who's watching this, that if you are white, one of the main ways that you are going to help support any type of movement or like the better future is by asking questions and talking about it. Because, you know, the term, you may have seen it on like Instagram or social media, the term like white silence is just another version of like racism, where you're kind of like, well, that doesn't affect me in my everyday life or my culture or my home or my family. So you don't say anything about it. But it's really like bringing up conversations like this, like every single day for the rest of our lives is what is going to change America for the better. Like just whoever, like yesterday, I went to church for the first time in like what seems to be a year, but I was talking to my preacher, and he brought it up in his sermon, just a little point where he was like, we all need to just understand, like we need to come together and learn more about each other. And afterwards, I went up to him and I was like, I really appreciate you speaking about that, because not many people feel confident enough to talk about it in front of a group of people, let alone just having a conversation. And I was saying to him, like, rather than going up to him and saying like, hey, yeah, nice sermon, the weather outside's nice, I'm like, we need to talk about this conversation every day for the rest of our life. And it was hard. It was kind of like intimidating. Yeah, it was a little intimidating, but getting out of your comfort zone is what makes you a better person.
Yeah, and that's what I think, like you're right, having these conversations and getting people outside of their comfort zone will allow for more of those conversations to continue to happen.
100%. There's a couple of terms that I was thinking of that I've learned about newly learned about, and it's racial bias, racism. It's like the difference between racial bias and racism. Okay, so I'm sure every one of us at one point of our life was like, oh, I'm not racist, because we're not, you know. Yeah. But we all have racial bias. So the term racial bias is thinking, I'll make it an example first before I say the definition. Like if we were on the street, it was late at night, and we saw a black man walking towards us, going to the other, or the thought of thinking like this black man, because he's black, is more likely to attack me or rob me or whatever, that is racial bias, where it's like you bring up the thought, you have the conscious or unconscious thought of that an ethnicity or a person, because of their ethnicity, is going to do something. And then racism is the act of acting on that thought or unconscious thought, where instead of staying on that side of the road, you go to the other sidewalk. Yeah. So that is something I personally have learned and that I've experienced. On both sides. Mm-hmm. And I'll get to that, where it's like I was on Leah Street, which is like sort of kind of like the ghetto, I guess you would say, but it's like in Utica, ghetto-ish, whatever. It was late at night. I was going to a small group, and there was a black dude walking in the middle of the street. I parked my car, and I never lock my car. I don't even care. I don't even care. I never lock my car, and I always leave my keys.
I never locked my car until I got robbed, and then I
Yeah. And then I never locked my car, but that one time I took my keys, I locked the car. And I was literally thinking, like, I myself am scared of another black man robbing me because that is how I grew up and how I'm formed to think. Yeah. And that's, if I'm thinking that, then I know for a fact everybody is thinking that. Because I'm thinking that about my own race. You know what I'm saying? And it's okay not to trust people. It's okay to have trust issues, but it's not okay to trust a specific.
Right. Yeah.
So I think to follow up with that story, what do you think is the reasoning for developing that bias?
Oh, yeah.
Like even because it's even developed inside of you. You said, so what do you think has helped, not helped, but pushed that bias to come about?
Yeah, 100%. I would say, just based off in media and how I was taught to, or how we are taught to come up. Like, so I think we were talking about this the other day with like media, where it's like in movies, music videos, TV shows, commercials, podcasts, whatever it may be, the black man, the black culture is morphed to be negative. I was watching a movie, literally, it's called The 13th. Highly recommended for everybody. It's where I got the information on like slavery and all that stuff. But in that movie, they were explaining that after slavery ended, there was a push to, in the media and like movies and stuff like that, to pretty much just develop this image around the black man, where it's like they're crazy, they can't control themselves around white women, they're gonna rob you, they're rapists, they're drug addicts, they're alcoholics. Where it's like, you see, I was watching, they had a clip in the movie where it was like this white dude, like face colored black, and his like he had lipstick on, and his eyes were like really white, and he was just made to look. He was like foaming at the mouth and everything like that, right? And we're sitting here looking at each other like, what the heck? Why would you, like, why? But that was the thing. And then, so it was like in that movie, this crazy looking black man who was actually a white guy came and like was like trying to rape this white woman or something like that. And then the Ku Klux Klan came in, saved the white woman, and killed the black man. And then everybody in the crowd was like, yeah! Where it's like, that's really where it started. Yeah. That's where it started. And then, now you have, fast forward like 200 whatever years, now you have people in the media doing the same thing as a black man. Like if I was a rapper or something like that, now we're just morphing ourselves to that image where it's like, in most rap, the top name artists, and I'm gonna call everybody out, Lil Wayne, Drake, Lil Uzi, Kodak Black, all these top name, yeah, it's just a rapper. All these top name artists, which I know your kids are listening to. If you go through their Spotify, I know for a fact they're listening to these rappers, are literally speaking about, last night, I'm not even gonna say anything, but they're rapping about drugs, girls, like sex, alcohol, just things that back in the day where the white man was trying to push that agenda onto the black culture, things back in the day, now we're pushing it onto our own culture and we're having our kids listen to it, which means that now our kids are thinking like, oh, like people think I could rap or something, like rap about your life, Derek. Like I did have a crazy life, but my mom's white, like, so.
They just assume because you're black that you can rap.
Oh yeah, 100%. Or that I can play basketball. I'm trash at basketball. I am trash. I played lacrosse, man.
Opposite.
Yeah.
No jumping involved.
Only ball I'm catches with a stick.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. So.
But no, I think you're right. Even right now, you see it in the media with everything that's going on. There is so much negativity around it that's portrayed on a daily basis versus showing the positive side of it.
Right, 100%.
And for either side, like, there shouldn't be any side whatsoever, but they're either one continuously showing some sort of negative interaction between black people and police, or black people and white people, or two, they're showing some sort of negative interaction of just the protests that are happening. Like they're showing the worst of the worst, which is a very small, tiny percentage of what's going on.
Like go show West Berlin. Like that was great.
You know,
Exactly. There's like all the, yeah.
Or LA. I know we saw in LA this week. Like it was, or over the weekend, it was peaceful protests, like thousands and thousands of people there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, no, I don't know, but there was probably something bad that happened, and that was the only thing that was shown. Like they didn't show any of the peaceful part of it or people unifying together. They show the 10 seconds of something bad happening, and then like, putting a blanket statement on that of like this is what happened today.
Yeah, that's it. My girlfriend's brother-in-law, he is in film. He's like a director in LA, or like in California, and he said a term to me like something about like the negative stuff is what sells. Like people are attracted to like those images where it's like, oh, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened.
Clickbait.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's what's so frustrating, like, from a business standpoint, is what people watch on a day-to-day basis. It's not news. Like you're watching marketing every day. Like that's all it is. It's marketing to get you to do something and react or act. And everyone has an agenda. So every YouTube doctor or any sort of activist, I shouldn't say any sort of, but most of them, like they have some sort of alternative agenda. So when you turn on the news and you see that this horrible thing is happening, they know it's because you're going to sit there and watch. Or when you see the article and the headline says something crazy, like if you actually click the article, the real story is probably not that crazy. You know, there's so many of these things that they just make it look clickable, because that gets clicks, which then gets views, which then gets ultimately money.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to.
The difference though between like back in the day, well, I'd say back in the day, but let's say like 20 years ago when we were young, and like the main source of media was like news, CNN, ABC, Fox. But the difference now is that we have the ability to create our own platform. Like if you are watching this, chances are you're watching on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be. We have the ability to overrun the mass media, you know what I'm saying? Where it's like that, yes, there is like a lot of things, like a lot of bad things that I've seen on my Instagram timeline, but I've also seen like so much positivity that has come from all the protesting. Like, for instance, there's a whole Instagram page that was created specifically just listing out all the positive changes that were happened, like laws that were passed, or police officers kneeling with protesters, or
More of that.
yeah.
stuff.
I just actually found one yesterday. It was Good News Connection.
Yeah.
It's just all good news. Like
Yeah, with the dude from The Office, Jim.
well,
Oh,
his thing,
That's
like
a different one.
what's on. I hope this doesn't happen. It got bought out.
Oh.
It sold to CBS. So I hopefully they don't ruin it, even though they probably will. But but yeah, like that was all great news.
Either way, it started off as really good. He did it himself, you know.
And I saw someone.
And that's just another example of like something that it's positive coming from negative. Like that happened during quarantine.
Right.
He created such an awesome platform during a pandemic.
I saw an interesting take when they did the Blackout Tuesday last week, and it was a black activist, and they're saying that while the intention was good, what people don't realize is you shut down the only real media source. Is that like it should be blackout for the news stations. It shouldn't be like, so social media sometimes is actually the only real news that you get. When I say that, I mean like someone who has actually recorded real footage of something happening on their phone and posted it, not someone who shared an article, but like someone's actual firsthand experience of a situation is the only reality in a media sense that you can have access to.
Yeah.
Because if you see it in a recording or a news article or a news station, it's most likely been chopped up, spliced back together to make it look a certain way, and then presented to you with a title that makes you say, "Oh my God!" Like, and that's really, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I was telling actually some of the kids here before everything happened and we had to close down about like when we were little and there was just news. Like I don't know if you remember that, where like they would sit down and report the news.
Yeah.
It was just a reporting on what happened. Like I'm thinking like a long time ago, like you said, 20, 25 years ago. Like there was no agenda with reporting it. It was like, today, this happened.
Right.
And that's not what it is anymore.
No. Especially now. But there is, especially now. There's a lot of positive Well, there's a lot of positive things happening, and I would say I'm a very positive guy. But here's a perfect example of what we're speaking about. I watched I don't ever watch the news, ever. I don't look at the newspaper unless I'm in it. Which I was. But
which is why he had to read the news.
yeah. But I was at my girlfriend's grandma's house. She watches the news, that's pretty typical. And there was like the 30-second intro, and it was like, coronavirus, black people dying, protests gone bad, looting. And in 30 seconds, I was like, the world is literally ending. Like, my mindset, and I'm a pretty positive person, my mindset was completely warped, where it was like, nothing good is happening in this world at all.
Yeah.
From 30 seconds of just straight up, like, clip after clip after clip after clip. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, I gotta get out of this house.
Well, one thing, and this is actually going back to what you talked about earlier with the perception that young people get about different cultures based on what they learn, whether it's through media or through what you learn in school. And I know you're big into visualization and positive mindset. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a real event and an imagined event. And the same thing, a young brain watching and experiencing something on the television, they don't necessarily know the difference between them experiencing it firsthand or because I saw it on television. So for the young people who are, if you're a parent at home and you're sitting down with your kids watching the news every night and they're seeing all these horrible things, and especially when it's painting certain races or certain classes of people or certain situations in a specific light, they don't know the difference between reality and news. So they accept that in their mind as, oh, this is what this means for these people. Oh,
Right.
This is what this means for these people. And then, like you said, it becomes a vicious cycle, or over time, it just keeps going around and round, and then they believe this, and then they have a behavior towards it, and then that reaction just reinforces the behavior, and then it continuously grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, for sure. It is a vicious cycle. You guys have any questions for me?
I mean, I think just really, I know that the question keeps going around of like, what can we do, right? But I think, we answered that as far as like have conversations.
Yeah. Vote for the correct officials. I believe it. But think about this. I looked it up just the other day, like population, who dominant populations in America based off of age. And the biggest population in America based off of age is from, I think it was 25 to 45. That's the majority of America, is people are aged, okay? Now, if you look at the people who are legitimately running things, they're in the smallest population, which is like 65 to dead.
I did see that. I forget what the average age of like Congress is, but it's
Yeah.
extremely different than what the average age of, or like
Right.
the largest population is.
So the largest population, us, 25, 45. Then it's 45 to 50 or 60. And that's like second largest. And then we got like 55 plus, okay? And those are the people running things. But they are out of touch. It's outrageous. I can't imagine if I had a coach, like some of the best coaches ever are like, whatever, like 45, right? Like 45 in that population. But they're still in touch with their athletes and stuff like that. You can't imagine having a 90-year-old guy come in and tell you, like, you're playing basketball. A 90-year-old guy comes in and he's like, yeah, this T formation that we used to do back in the 1820s is what's gonna win. Like, no, dude, you're out of date, my guy. You are out of date. So, yeah, I feel very strongly about that, because if I'm gonna listen to somebody, I need to know either one, that they know what they're talking about, they are knowledgeable, they are around my age, they have been through what I've been through, or even remotely been around the things that I've been around, and that's what I'm gonna listen to. So nine times out of 10, if you got an 85-year-old man trying to tell an entire country of the population that's like 2 decades younger than him, it does not make any sense at all in my brain. It doesn't make any sense.
He has his ways.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, yeah. So that is one of the things. And then so voting and then experiencing cultures, is two things that I will say to everybody is one of the way that anybody can help. In like, just imagine this, like how many times, if you're watching this, how many times on a Saturday have you found yourself watching Netflix midday on a Saturday, right? You could literally use that time, take your family, have a conversation with them, or go out. You have Google, go out, like, oh, there's like community events that happen all the time that are multiple cultures combined together, whether it's like, I don't know, I'm literally just making this up on the spot, but maybe I'll start this. Tapas night, Black History night, jazz night, hip hop night, or folk music, polka dancing, whatever it may be. Experience cultures. There's so many cultures and so many things to experience in this world, but we're just so, like, I live in Whitesboro by the grace of God because I live with my friend's family that I grew up with, but still in Whitesboro, I am the only black person in that neighborhood. So if I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but I'm the only black person in that neighborhood. If I walked around that neighborhood shirtless, and anybody who says it's one of those neighborhoods where you drive by and you're like, hey, Tom, Fred, Toby, John, you wave at everybody. Imagine if one day they were waving at me and I was like, turn my music up, just straight up blasting rap music. That's a negative experience that they had with black people. And they're not experiencing anything else other than that. So now they're like, dang, black people are rude. And he looked at me like I was ugly. You know what I'm saying? So not only are you offended, but you took it personal. So really, use the time. I can't stress this enough, and I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to use my time that I have to go and experience new cultures, whether it may be just watching a movie that is a black lead actor, or going to a restaurant that is ran by a black person, or authentic Asian or Bosnian. And that's the big thing with us here in Utica, is that it's a melting pot, right? Going to Proctor, there was Bosnians, Russians, Burmese, Asians, Africans, Italians, just Polish people, Irish, like all together. And that community is still there, you know? So that's the biggest things, like getting out, experiencing new cultures, and learning, educating yourself on who to vote for. And
that's what I think, like the important piece though is the action.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of times that, like we talked earlier about that conscious blindness, is people want to throw money at it.
Yeah.
Like they want to say, oh, well, I donated to this fund or to this idea or this movement.
That's not enough.
But that doesn't solve a connection problem. It doesn't solve an educational problem. It doesn't solve an interaction problem.
You can't trump a conversation.
It just says, oh,
100%.
it's like a selfish way of making yourself feel good.
Yes.
Of like, oh, here, I donated to this cause, so I'm good.
I would think getting
I checked
involved,
my box,
and like you guys can relate to sports. I played sports, but I didn't really connect with sports. For me, it was dance. And it wasn't until college where I could really connect with different cultures.
Yeah.
And it was through dance that I was able to do that.
Right.
And that opened my eyes to like, oh my God, like, you're in a bubble sometimes, just in your own world.
Yeah. And if you look at most of the things that we have today in this culture, it come from the black culture, like dancing, or like country music, hip hop, some of the things we hear on the radio. Like a lot of it, if you do your research, which maybe I obviously will continue to do more research and everything like that, but most of it comes from black cultures or other cultures. That's what America is founded on, is just stealing other cultures and making it our own.
With dance, there's so many like twerking and stuff like that, where people they don't even know the background of it.
Yeah,
I'm like, that's like dance hall and Jamaican stuff. I'm like,
Yeah. So, yeah,
Connect as human beings.
100%.
There was a great, Jocko Willing had a great video he did, and he talked about back in 1914, during the war, that there was on Christmas Eve, and he was telling the story that it's supposed to be like I guess the legend says that on Christmas Eve, the British and the Germans were at the front lines fighting against each other, and they could hear one another singing Christmas carols and laughing, and they started to call back to one another. And what they ended up doing was meeting. They ended up meeting in right on no man's land. And they had conversations, they shared drink together, they shared food, and they were engaging. And then the next day, it continued. And it got to the point where the generals ended up saying, like, to attack one another, and they're getting orders. And what they would do is they would notify each other of what was coming. So that way they could hide and they could move and they could survive. And then the pressure from the top down, like we talked before about like leadership, the pressure from the top down got so much and the message got so ingrained of war and battle that the war started back up again. But for that small portion of time, they just met each other in the middle of the field and they connected as humans for a mutual cause to hang out, learn about each other, talk, share drinks, share food. But it was a great video that Jocko did on that, to say like right now is a time to come together as humans, like have a human connection.
And then keep that for 400 years forward.
For 400 years forward, 100%. Black people have been enslaved for 400 years. Still to this day, but we're fighting. We're making, there's positive things happening from it that I'm truly surprised about.
It's awesome. It's awesome to see the mobileness of it happen.
Yeah, I think at this point it's very clear that things won't quiet, I guess you'd say, until change occurs.
Yeah, definitely not. That's the biggest thing where I did kind of change the topic just a little bit, but I did read something about like the possibility of burning out for like, people who don't have this conversation frequently. And it's just like, imagine like you've never worked out ever in your entire life, and then one week you decided to work out like 3 times a day. You're gonna burn out after that week. And it's the same thing with having conversations about race, racism, police brutality, and stuff like that, that many people haven't had in a really long time. And now we're having it very, very frequently. So you just gotta really make sure that you keep the enthusiasm with it, stuff, with that stuff.
I was talking to one of my friends about this. She's Cuban, and she's talking about how she has experienced this as well and everything. And we were talking, and I was saying, this really needs to not be something that's like, what's the next shiny object next week?
Right.
You're like, oh, the hurricane's gonna hit the coast of Florida, all the attention goes there, and it forgets about. It's like we have to keep moving forward.
Back to the media. Don't let that control Don't let that control where you see.
Exactly.
It's exciting though, because there are some, like you're saying, like get out and do things and experience things and culture. Like it's so cool. It's so amazing.
Not just because you get to meet different people, experience different cultures.
Exactly.
That's why I love dance so much.
I would like to say one thing about like kind of going back to my thesis. Like one of the ways that I spoke about ways we could eliminate or reduce rates of police brutality was keeping, I'm gonna sidebar real quick. One of the reasons I love working here so much, and this isn't scripted, okay? But I was just talking to I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, where it's like, you guys push me out of my comfort zone, which is continuously making me a better person, right? Where it's like, I'm always being held to a higher standard, and I'm always being held to, like, expected to reach that standard, right? So I think like that was one of the things that I kind of said in my thesis, was that like police officers need to be held to that higher standard continuously throughout their entire career, where it's like continuous testing. And I know as like a police officer, because I wasn't a police officer, but I majored in criminal justice, where there is already so many things to learn and know. But like continuous testing, whether it be like on the law, continuous psychological tests, because you're constantly seeing things, negative experiences, dead bodies, or like trying to solve murder cases, or you're constantly seeing negative things. So constant psychological testing. And then it was like on top of that, like continuously recreating a high intensity situation. So where when you do have to pull your gun out, which I don't think anybody ever needs to pull a gun out because there's tasers, which I don't, or unless we're all immune to tasers. I'm so confused as to why there are guns being pulled out. But when you do pull something out or you're in a fight or something like that, you can kind of move around like you've been there before, rather than it's just like, bah, 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 where you're like shooting off eight shots. So those are like 4 things for police departments that they could change.
I was just talking to my sister-in-law about this and just talking about like mental health as well, and that it's almost frowned upon for you to go see a psychiatrist or go to like a health coach or something like that, because it's almost like you have a problem. It's like, no.
It's called hegemonic masculinity. I took a class also in my senior year, and it was like, this was supposed to be like a joke also, but now I've learned something from it, you know, where my school was super liberal and everything like that. But anyway, hegemonic masculinity is like that masculinity changes with cultures and time and places and stuff like that. And in the police culture, as a dude, as a man, you want to be masculine. So it's like, nothing affects me. I don't care what happens. Like, I'm a man. I'm gonna support my family. This, that. But like, dog, no. Like, you need to go and talk to somebody about that. You know.
I think too, like what you said before about here, in terms of accountability, I think that applying it to the police sector is big as well. Is if you bred a culture of accountability to one another on sensitive topics like this, it would reduce the incidence of that occurring. And that's one thing like you've experienced here is like there's a culture of accountability. So you know that if you don't do something, that you're held to a higher standard, not necessarily just by us, but by the other people on your team.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they're all holding each other to that higher standard. And so you see the same thing in military. Like in order for operations to go the way they're supposed to, everyone needs to be held to a certain standard. So that's why when you get to the very high level SEAL teams and all of these specialized training forces, it's extremely rigorous testing and standards and then accountability and trust in order to get to that level, because there is no room for error. And you could take that same principle and apply it to the different sectors when it comes to policing.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and it's really, it's not a crazy concept, because there's so many other jobs and workforces that are holding their employees to a standard where they have to meet, like, continuously. But I read this the other day where it's like barbers go through more job training than a police officer. Barbers have to go through more schooling and training and stuff like that than a police officer has to get on to the workforce, which is, fact check me. My cell phone number is...
Shoot, Derek.
I think like the last thing we saw just this week with the accountability is in the fitness community.
Yeah.
Is that you know, when leadership stepped out of line for the CrossFit brand, the people inside of that community rose up to hold them accountable.
Yeah, which is,
like, it's unfortunate that had to happen, but it's also really cool to see the unification of the affiliates inside of that brand stepping up to hold their leadership accountable and let 100%. Someone know what's unacceptable.
100%. And it's also kind of like, if you are in like that high of if you're pretty much at the top, like, chances are, like, over a elongated period of time, you're gonna think like, well, let's see what I can get away with. Or like, my man Greg Glassman has gotten away with a lot in the past like couple of years, and with whether it be like just completely changing the brand and not caring about the people that were relying on that, or it would be like cutting down the athletic side and trying to focus on this, or like just with his words, and nobody has really held him accountable, you know. But now it's it's about that time.
It happened.
It happened very quickly.
For sure.
No, but it's good. It's good for that to happen because it makes the brand better. It makes the people associated with the brand better. It removes the possibility of them being associated with his negativity and his mistakes or his, I'd say, poor choice of words and inappropriate use of words. And that needs to happen all around.
That's another phase of change. A lot of people associate change with it being bad. It's not.
No, change is always good. Like, as completely side note, like my senior year of college, I was like just straight up an idiot. And I got banned from the dorms, and like there was mostly just dorm life. So I had to go out and find an apartment and everything like that. And at the time I was thinking like, oh, like my life sucks, this, that, whatever. But that set me up to learn on how to get an apartment in the future, like after I graduated, or like really taught me responsibility.
This is a silver lining to almost anything,
Exactly.
right? As terrible as stuff can be, there's some sort of learning experience that we can get out of things.
Every problem will deliver a gift. You just have to be willing to find it.
That's really good.
Quote me. Someone told me that once, so I can't claim credit for it.
But you heard it from him first, so you heard it.
Tony Robbins, someone like that.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah. Same here.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this very candid conversation. Hopefully you find it beneficial. Just to
Take away some education as well as some positive messages and ideas of how you at home could help to make a change or get involved, or just conversations to start. I'm sure Derrick's always open for conversation if you'd like to talk with him.
If you want to talk to me, if you come to this gym or you see me in public, come up to me. I am a talkative person. I will talk to you. I will talk to you genuinely like you're a human.
Since day one he has, which is what we love about him. But seriously, thank you for having this conversation. And
I'm so happy to be here. Happy that you guys are willing, you know?
it's where it
Hey,
starts.
that's where it all starts, man.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Adios.